Good morning, friends, and welcome to Grace St. Luke's Episcopal Church. I'm the Reverend Ollie Rencher, Rector, and I'm so delighted that you've joined us today for one of our formation offerings. We have with us Brendan Housler, a member of the parish, and just a wonderful soul, and our topic is cycling by faith through the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm mindful that change needs to take place all the time in life and how the pandemic has changed so much for how we live. And I've been thinking a lot lately about how many religious and spiritual persons have relied even more on their faith for navigation during this pandemic. Many have started, they've renewed some things, they further committed to some things, hobbies and habits, recreations and professions. And Brendan happens to be a full-time cycling coach, and he's president of a firm called Evoke, and he'll tell you more about it in just a moment. But he's also a winner of several cycling awards, and he started it long before there was the COVID-19 pandemic. And so Brendan has been on the road literally for a long time, and I've always been humbled by that as I got to meet him some years ago. But I'm delighted to host a conversation with Brendan about his faith and how it continues to sustain his journey on the road of starts and stops, as I was talking with him earlier, and twists and turns and accomplishments, and all of those things empower him to stay the course. So thanks for tuning in today. And Brendan, I'm so glad you're able to spend a bit of time with me for a conversation. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so tell me, just tell us a bit about you, as kind of a snapshot of your faith journey and the role that faith plays in daily life. And I met you, of course, through Grace St. Luke's Church, an Episcopal church in Midtown Memphis, and you can start there and go wherever you'd like to go. So,
Yeah, so I think we met, was it 2018 maybe? I'm trying to think exactly because Grace St. Luke's, I'm relatively new to the Episcopalian faith. I've been Roman Catholic my whole life. For personal reasons, was looking around for something different with my husband Chris, and had lived in Memphis at the time, and just you go. I almost liken it to when you start looking for colleges. You can walk on some campuses and you're like, this place is okay. You walk on other places like, wow, this place is awesome. And the Episcopal churches in general are so welcoming.
hmm,
That's kind of one of the first places we went back to. And eventually, with you guys being luckily right around the corner from us, just the people and the way we felt so like we belong there was really encouraging. And then I think in the process of becoming an Episcopalian, um, the process was really enjoyable. At first, I was like a little hemming and hawing that we had to do classes, and
right?
there's a process to it. But I'm glad there was a process because I learned a lot about the faith, a lot about myself, and the way in which I think the faith can work with present day. Which for someone my age, I'm almost 40, a lot of people are like, well, church isn't really modern. And I think
Hmm,
that's where the Episcopalian faith shines. Meredith was the one leading us through everything. And it was
right.
really like, I left telling friends about this. Like, man, you got to like, if you're into something beyond yourself, but something that works with asking questions and not just a dogma, like this
Yes.
is this is an interesting place. So that's really my snapshot of me and the Episcopal Church. Faith has always been an important part of my life. When I was Catholic growing up, went to church all the time. Didn't love it as a kid, but I stayed the course through college. It felt like it was something I wanted in there.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, I went to a Spanish mass most of the time because it fit into my college life schedule of not super early in the morning and
Okay.
later options. And even though I did not was not fluent in Spanish, it kind of shows you how much a mass can transcend just the
Hmm,
words that you're saying and what is the community all about.
right.
And yeah, I had a couple different parishes in Chicago, and really excited to see where my faith journey continues to go. I'm playing the long game with that, and I think you kind of nailed it in maybe our previous conversation a little bit. Like, there's an endurance aspect to faith.
Right.
Uh, you just got to keep going with it.
Yeah, and it's also mysterious. It is mysterious and it's complicated, but it has sustained our ancestors, those who've
Hmm.
gone before you and me, and our parents and our parents' parents.
Hmm.
Faith is how they were able to get through life in a way that we probably will never fully understand, and the same will be for those who come after us in this world.
Hmm.
You know. And so thinking about that and just how important it is, and you do light up when you talk about your journey,
Hmm.
Brendan. That's something I do recall, and I was a part of some of your classes when you were preparing to be confirmed or received from the Roman Church into the Episcopal Church, and you were curiously there and
Hmm.
learning and asking questions and I made a statement one day that if you're doing that, that means you're staying the course. You know, that confirmation doesn't mean that we stop thinking.
Hmm.
If anything, it's we ask more even questions. There are even more
Hmm.
questions to ask. So,
Well, I think that's one of the biggest things is, and now Meredith will scold me for forgetting these, but the three big things about the Episcopalian faith were that it's how do you formally say, like, it's not just rules that are written, but it's the reasoning of like how we live with them through our life.
right. Yeah,
Um,
scripture, tradition, reason.
yeah,
Three, right.
and that really was like sparked even more questions. And there was a thing in our booklet that I actually think this book should be, maybe it is handed out to every Episcopalian, but if you as a former Catholic, you are just sort of there in church because your parents brought you there, whereas it was an interesting experience transitioning and being received by the Episcopalian faith, because as an adult you're putting in more effort naturally. Now granted, there might be a 10-year-old out there who's super into their faith and they're more into it than I was at 10 years old. But going through that process as an adult, we're reading through this small, short, but interesting book. And one thing that always stuck out to me was they said, "We welcome questions. Do you have
Yes.
questions? Ask them." And it wasn't like, "No, this is the rule. This is how we're doing it, Brendan." It was like, "Well, explain your situation to me. What's going on in your life? How does the scripture and tradition, and then the reason, like, how does this apply actually to you?"
Right.
And that was, I think, the biggest thing of the Episcopal Church focusing on me as an individual, as opposed to, "Hey man, you're just like Johnny down the road." It's like, well, that's obviously not true.
Right.
We're all different. We all have a different experience. um, and that was really, I didn't even know that that was part of the faith. And
Okay.
so
Okay.
learning that in the process was even more of like, man, I'm in the right place. This is really awesome.
Well, I'll take a pointer from that and remember that book. Yeah, I mean it's called "A People Called Episcopalians" is the name of the book, and
Hmm.
it's something that we don't give out to everyone, but there could be a resurgence of
Yeah.
how the book is used because it is a great primer to help prompt conversation for individuals and households and whether you're younger or older or need a refresher, I do know people have found that book to be helpful. So, well, I just
Yeah.
appreciate, like I said, you so much, and I've been always impressed by your work, and I'd love for you to share how you came into your work with Evoke and any highlights, lowlights along the way, and how you've stayed the course in this business. You know, it's a fascinating work, and people who are joining us today may be well interested to know more about what you do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually, so I'd sold medical devices for about 13 years, and was actually doing that when I moved to Memphis. And um, I was working at a hospital up in Arkansas and just was kind of really burning out from it. The industry had changed a lot from when I started back in 2006, and I was just sort of, it wasn't what I loved. It was definitely a job, but I always had this sort of side gig of coaching athletes. And without getting too in the weeds, there's these power meters we have on bikes, and there's endurance based algorithms now that are on computer software that are ways that you can help make people faster. And so if they have an event, you can help them prepare for that through data as opposed to just guessing at workouts they should do. And I slowly started thinking, man, maybe I should like try and put some more effort into growing this as a business as opposed to just having a few people as athletes. And with social media and creating content and putting things out there, Um, I think when you say low light or highlight, I think anyone who started a business knows there's lows when you first start. There's self-doubt. There's, should I do this? Am I doing the right thing? Is this crazy? And then highlights, I went full time with coaching in 2019, just before the pandemic. Actually, I decided
Okay.
to leave my medical device life behind, which is a really hard thing to separate from after it was definitely part of my identity. Um, I think a highlight is now there's four other coaches in Evoke with myself. We have athletes all over the world, which today still blows my mind that we have
Right.
a WhatsApp chat with somebody in Switzerland and somebody in Italy and somebody in Ireland, and then all these other athletes in the US. And it's
Right.
like, it's just going to places that I never thought were possible. But I had the faith and, kind of made a plan and just day in and day out went after it. And I'm just really excited to see where this keeps going. One of my mentors, real briefly, was a guy, Doug Zell, who started Intelligentsia Coffee.
Okay.
And one of the first things he told me was, before we were getting very specific on Evoke, but more just on business in general, he said, give it 5 years. And I said, well, tell me more about that. He said, like, wherever you are at year two, you're not even anywhere yet. Like, there will be an identity behind the business truly at year five. Now, granted, hopefully you make it to year 2 and 3 and 4 and then five to see that
Okay.
realization. But at year five, that's when you're kind of like, okay, this is who we are. This is what we're doing. Um, so only being halfway there and have been blessed to find success with this, I'm really excited, and that's extremely motivating to me.
Great. So encouraged for sure.
Definitely,
Yeah.
100%.
And
Yeah.
that's hard to imagine, for some, and at the same time, the COVID-19 pandemic has, I found, at least created a space for people to try things and to immerse themselves in ways that they otherwise would have been distracted or maybe thought was impossible. And you are an example of that. This is a time when people have actually thrived in new work and things that they maybe started out with a lot of uncertainty and could back away pretty quickly because there's even more unknown, and still you've stayed in it, and I can tell that there's a certain peace that you have about planning to stay with it, and just even hearing about the mentor's advice to you and naming the milestones that you've experienced, that speaks to what you're describing. So
I think even on like a more micro level, when most athletes, the thing that's amazing about endurance sports, and they're not as popular in the US as they are in like Europe, but your body goes through so many changes and you can truly become a totally different person through endurance sports. And it's not just a perfect linear progression. There's stair steps to it. But the number of people that are like, wow, I can't believe I accomplished this, or wow, I can't believe I did this power for 30 minutes, or wow, I can't believe I like conquered this type of race. It's when people stay the course, and it's it's amazing what they achieve. And I think that I look back to when I first started and never would have thought cycling would have taken me the places it's taken me. But it's a lifestyle, and so if you keep doing it day in and day out, you will continue to amaze yourself with it. And I think it's similar to people with faith. It's I mean, I think when you mention parents, I definitely have a strong faith because of my parents. And just no matter what, it was faith was always a huge part of their life, and I can see why. It makes me
yeah.
emotional like thinking about them. It's a
Well,
really good thing to see.
that's a great way, Brendan, though, to honor them. And you and I were talking earlier about faith. My parents' faith definitely has impacted my life and my journey, and so that's why when I encounter others who are finding a way to stay the course,
Hmm.
that's coming from something, and that's typically outer influences as well. I mean, yeah, we have what goes on in ourselves, and our spiritualities are very different by each person, but there are those external factors which many times are mentors, parents, siblings, clergy, therapists, you name it, accountability partners that can help all of that seem, or I guess an affirmation.
Yeah. And when you see it,
Affirmation.
it's, they say actions speak louder than words. They weren't
Right.
just telling me to go to church and not being there themselves. I think when you see somebody living it, it's like, man, okay, it's something to witness that. And,
Yeah.
it definitely has power behind that.
Yeah. So tell me, I'm this is someone who I'm an occasional bike rider.
Hmm.
I enjoy my time out cycling around, going, 10 or 15 miles over the course of several hours and not in a hurry to do most of it and just enjoying it. And also, I'm intrigued by the cyclist and what she or he does when they're cycling like they are, and thinking about your business. And how did you come to the name of your firm?
So Evoke is evoke your best self. So
Okay.
we're really it's somewhat corny, but I really, you had used the word enjoyment. I tell everybody, whether they're trying to do their first Grand Fondo or there's somebody who's going for like a national championship, you have to enjoy this process and it has to be fun. Because with endurance sports, if you're not excited about going out and you're physically crushing yourself on some of these events and long training rides or whatever, if you're not pumped up about that, you're not going to achieve what your highest levels of achievement and performance. And
Okay.
so it's really evoke your best self, not just on the bike but off the bike, and this has to work with your life. Everyone has all these other things going on in life besides the bike riding, and it has to work with that. So we just wanted something that wasn't, we kind of, EVOQ, it actually is. I was curious if you would say evoke. People are like evoc, like it's not a natural word that we see every day, but we kind of wanted something like that. Um, so yeah, evoke your
Nice.
best self. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. So I'm just also curious, when people are training and from distances and time spent, like give me some, what's a scale of what people train for? I
Yeah.
mean, even the simplest cyclist to the most advanced.
So in terms of like what events they train for, or what is
Yeah,
the
or
training like?
distances and the
Sure.
training itself even.
Some people might want to just do their first, like, what might be called like a medio fondo. It might be 50 miles. It might be hilly. It might, if you live around Memphis, it's probably not, there's not too many hills there, so it doesn't have to be a crazy terrain. um you know Everybody starts somewhere. I mean, my first ride, this was before I had a cycling computer. I remember I was in Chicago. I felt like I rode far. I went home on MapQuest, that will show you how long ago that was. Went on MapQuest and mapped it out, and I was like, whoa, I rode 16 miles today. That was like a huge pat on the back for myself.
Right.
I was pumped up and I couldn't wait to do it again. So really, I would say it starts with as small or large of a mileage that excites you,
So
like
there's hope for me, is what you're saying.
there's tons of hope for you. Anybody that wants to get better, that's the only prerequisite. Like, what are you doing and where do you want to go with
Fair
this?
enough.
And I think everybody should have a reach goal. I mean, there's categories in cycling, and so you start as a cat 5 and category 5, and you work up to cat 1, which is basically like, you're an amateur but you do races with professionals. And
Okay.
I remember I did my cat 5 races. I moved up to cat 4, and when the group is going too fast and you can no longer hang on, or there's surges or whatever, and you get detached and you're now riding by yourself, and it's kind of a sad time, that's called you got dropped. So
Okay.
I remember I got dropped. I will never forget, I got dropped by this group of cat 4s, and I remember thinking, man, maybe I'm just not fast enough to race with these guys. Like, it was the new level, right?
Okay.
Then you go back, and then you get a little bit farther, and then you get a little bit farther, and then you maybe last the whole race, and then you're trying to get in 10th place, and then you win, and then you upgrade, and it's just this process. And so we all start knowing nothing, and we all start a much less skilled version of where we can go to. And that
Okay.
again, I think is the amazing thing of endurance sports. It's not just, did my basketball team win or lose? Did I score? Did I not score? There's different ways to see improvement in yourself over all these events, and that's the amazing thing.
Okay.
So yeah.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that. But like I said, the joke for myself is there's hope. There's
there's
hope for
there's
me.
tons there's tons of hope. I know a couple of cyclists at GSL, so they might be knocking on your door for a weekend ride.
That's right. That's right. So, what are some things, because a lot of what you're describing, the word growth, personal growth comes up for me, thinking about what have you learned personally and how have you grown spiritually since the start of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and now it's continuing. And I see that there is a relationship between the personal and the spiritual, and you're doing what you're doing with great joy. How would you reflect on that growth or
Yeah, it's a great question.
learnings?
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is when COVID started and everything really shut down, I think we all experienced that complete shakeup to our schedule and our day-to-day life. And for me, while I wasn't there every weekend, having virtual masses, there was a thing on
Okay.
the schedule that I was used to and was now there well before anything else. Sure, was it the same? No. But was it something that kept you connected and kept you going? Very
Okay.
similar to, most athletes are not professional athletes and they have other jobs. And, Nancy might be preparing for a big race in May, and April, her business, starts getting really busy and she can't train as much. You just got to keep going with as much as you can do. You are one person. Keep
Right.
keep going. Don't quit. Like, things are going to get hard, and you have to make a choice as a person. Do you fold to that, or do you rise to the challenge? And I think we were all challenged through COVID, and we continually are challenged as it's not, hasn't left us, unfortunately. Um, I think just seeing the faith piece being there, even though
Okay.
I wasn't in a physical church, knowing I could go to a virtual mass, or, the nice thing about faith is you don't need all of that to pray on your own and
That's
to
true.
stay connected. So it's I think that was a learning, but also just a reminder, like, this thing is always there. And it's been something that even in, we've all had times in life that are not the rosiest, and our own struggles in life. I think for me, like, faith was always a thing that was always there.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Wow. Well, I just appreciate hearing that because it has been, I'm very relational, as are you, and also I like my time away and my time to remove and yet being in the community of the Mass and saying the prayers in common and sharing the sacrament, the bread. And right now we're administering bread only, we're not administering the chalice even right now. And so, but even what that's like can be powerful to know that people are joining us digitally. There's something really humbling about that. And we, whoever's leading the service, as celebrant, will say hello to those who are joining us online. And we even provide what's called spiritual communion prayers that can be said by them because those were designed for when people could not physically gather. And those go back centuries. That there are times when people could not receive the bread in their hands and they knew that others were able to do so, and so they were being remembered. And so there's something powerful about knowing that you, especially, you're traveling all over the world. Well, right now you're more limited because of the pandemic and what travels allow for, but the fact that you can stop and find a way, and we at Grace St. Luke's have been intentional to try and keep those programs available, and those will now be just an indefinite part of who we are. So that won't change even if we get to a time when the pandemic is minimized. We now will have an online presence, like doing what we're doing right now. this would normally be something that would be in Tresvant Hall in the parish hall where we would gather for a dialogue, and there would be 75 to 125 people sitting in chairs watching you and I have this conversation. Well, now we have, sometimes over 1,000 people who will tune in to offerings such as this because they want to know what's happening, and particularly faith based things that are happening in people's lives. And you're a great example, Brendan, of people being faithful and tying that into their work. And it's not a self righteousness or a religiosity, no airs that you put on around that, and that can be encouraging to others. So I just
It's
want to
awesome. I
acknowledge.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I just
Thank
want to
you.
acknowledge what that feels like, and yeah,
I think you guys having the digital programs, it goes back to one of our first comments today of, being modern and using reason and finding a way to help people, because at the end of the day, you're always the first person to, hey, how can I help you? And how are you doing? And this is really, shows the church shining in trying to
mm,
spread the ability for people to have faith. And I think it's one of those things where a lot of times we want everything to be perfect. And it's since we're tying this in with cycling, like people will have a workout and they don't totally nail it, and many A-type personalities like, I failed, I'm a failure. And I'm like, come on, man, you just barely missed it. Like, you went out, you gave it your all. That counts for so much, as opposed
right,
to somebody who's just going to say, I'm busy today. You know what? I'm going to forget that workout today. I'm just going to do it tomorrow. And I think we need to remember that with our faith. It's not always going to be perfect. And it's similar to the mass. Maybe when I'll show up and there's a million other things going on. And sometimes maybe we're not supposed to tell us to my reverend, you don't want to
but
be
no,
there.
you
You
can
need,
tell,
yeah, you might not want to be there.
and we know, we know,
And
we
you're a
know,
little, you might be distracted, and it takes you 10-15 minutes to kind of clear your head and be like, you know what, I'm here for a reason right now. Like, I need to put my focus and energy
mm,
into this mass and not all these other things that I'm worried about or thinking about that I can't control right now,
right,
because you know um
uh,
and I think that's the amazing thing about mass is, in our world of got to be connected all the time,
right.
the phone goes off for an hour, and somehow the world manages without us for that hour when we're gone. But it's the same thing when I ride. I put my phone on do not disturb, and I just don't take phone calls, because I'm not doing anything that is life-saving and dire need. So I'm going to focus on that task at hand. And I think faith and cycling have helped me to see that, like, have focus and I don't know if I like be present. It's a little overused term of be present, but it is important to remember to take inventory of where you are and who are you around, and are you giving them the attention that they need at that moment in time.
Right. Wow. Well, thank you for that. And also, I'm mindful of our time as our conversation comes to a close. What advice, Brendan, would you give to others whose faith is much like the world in this time of cycling? You think about the world of cycling and
Mm-hmm.
twists and turns and starts and stops and
Mm-hmm.
accomplishments and even what some would call disappointments. What advice would you give to others who are on the faith journey?
Yeah, I think that we we all say, like, that's life, right? There's highs, there's lows, but that's everything in life, including our faith. There's going to be times when you have doubts, and there's going to be times when you are like, man, this is the best thing ever. I'm so glad I've been going to mass. But through all of that, have faith, and don't give it up just because things get hard sometimes. I think that if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, but there's going to be some hurdles that you have to jump over to find those glorious days, and take the negative ones in stride. Try to
Mm,
find a little, maybe a silver lining from some bad experiences, but in the end, it's play the long game. Like endurance sports, it's not what you do necessarily exactly every day, but in the big grand scheme of things, like, are you trying to be a faithful, good person, and trying to help your fellow man or woman along this journey? and
Mm.
hopefully I'm doing that. So
Well,
um,
I find that you are. I check in with you from time to time, and
I appreciate
you've been
that.
a very active part of the parish's men's fellowship, which gathers online virtually on Thursday mornings, and we just started back up. And you sent a message indicating you couldn't be at the last, but glad to know that that'll keep going.
Yes.
And I'm just glad for those sorts of moments.
So
Um,
I will say one of the best parts of the Episcopal faith are the people. It's not the mantra, it's not the rules, it's not it is the people that have come into this faith for one reason or the other. I think I've told you in traveling for different races and stuff, I'll stop in a church usually on if the race is
yes,
in Sunday morning, I'll go
right.
into a church. It is amazing how welcoming people are. And it actually, when I first became Episcopalian, it freaked me out a little bit because I'm like,
I
why are
remember
people
you were
like,
trying to run away. You were
yeah, these people
walking
are like
away.
really nice here. No knocks on any other religion, but I've been Catholic before, and you walk into another church, and it's nobody really says anything to you, and that's just a different scene, and not for good or bad. But the Episcopal faith, I never thought I would do a men's group with my parish. It just seemed odd to me. But these are all guys that are like really smart people, really emotionally high emotional IQ, people that listen, and it's like I've become friends with these people.
Right.
Fun, oddly enough, like mostly through a Zoom because we haven't been able to meet in person for so long, and now that I've moved from Memphis, I'm like, man, I hope this Zoom keeps going because I don't want to be left out.
Right.
So
But we will continue.
uh,
We'll do both, as you know, and know that you're present even when you're not. Speak about being present. You are remembered by the group that gathers with you so much, and they'll be glad to know that we had a conversation like this because just as you've shared some wisdom when we've had some of our fellowship times, they've shared wisdom with you
definitely.
as well, and that's what this is about. That's what the community of faith is all about, and so it's just a this is a perfect way to spend time, I will say, and I
Agreed.
know we are wrapping up, but just to say again, Brendan Housler, thank you for your time and for this conversation, and for those of you who tuned in, whomever you are, wherever you are. This is Grace St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Midtown Memphis, and today's topic, and I love it, just thinking about it, cycling by faith through the COVID-19 pandemic with my brother and friend in Christ, Brendan Housler. So,
Thanks, brother Ollie. Appreciate you having me
welcome.
on.
Peace and blessings to all.